we had this theory yesterday that maybe the whole reason that this book is called Torah Or is because it's about revealing the concealed light in the Torah. And that was the big chiddush of the Alter Rebbe after he came out of the second incarceration.
I don't think the Alter Rebbe saw it in print, did he?
No, I don't think so. Okay. Now he says, where are we? So now we're in this new topic of Potech et Yadecha. So let's just read one sentence before so we know what he's going to do with this. At the very end of Mem Zayin, when the wine of Torah comes in, the secrets come out, meaning Hu Ora Avaganuz. What comes out is the light of the concealed love. Me'elem el agilui. And again, the something being revealed when it was concealed means nothing new happened here. And the modern mashal for this is the light of the CBR, the cosmic background radiation. It's always been here, but you need an instrument to reveal it. So the instrument in this case is the person learning Torah. Meaning, I can give you the book of Torah, but until you learn it, the light can't come out. And really what it brings out is not just the light in the Torah, but it turns out that this light was something that you had in your soul also. Okay? It was always in your soul.
There's something which maybe, if I understand it right, might contradict that. Because it says that Tzitz of the Kohen Gadol did Kapara for the Jewish people when he was wearing it. But also did Kapara when he wasn't wearing it, when it was in the drawer and put away. So there was the light of Hashem coming down even when it wasn't in use.
Why does it also work when it's not on him? Just out of it. Where did you say that?
Famous Vedra.
Says what?
It says it's mechaper even if he's not wearing it. Just the very fact that it exists.
Huh? So then he would say the act of making it and consecrating it, inducting it into service, is what makes it whole, and
it has more power.
And wearing it is accidental.
No, when he wears it, it is more power.
So it adds something, but it's not the necessary condition. But again, all these things are things that you wear, meaning that they're levushim. That is not the light of. That's not the same light.
The secret light of the Torah.
The light of the Torah is not a levush. It can't be a levush. That's the whole point. It doesn't come in each levush. It's not integrated ever. And we said that this light, the light that's both in the Torah and in a person's soul root, where all the souls come from, it comes out b'bchinat b'chol mo'odecha. It comes out when you go beyond yourself. You go, and that's why we say that Hashem should open His hands. It's a very strange symbol, metaphor. Why open your hands and give us will? Why?
Because it's here. Now you're going to take it.
So obviously it's not literal. So it's a symbol for something. So what's it a symbol for? So here he gives a big chiddush. He says Yudecha. You don't read it Yadecha. You say Yudecha. Meaning, don't read it as hands, read it as the letters Yud. Okay? Why? Because the Yud symbolizes, in God's name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, Yud symbolizes the contraction. So, Yudecha, hen hem b'chinat ha'tzimtzumim ravim v'atzumim, me'or en sof baruch hu, liot ishtalshalut ha'madrigot me'ila le'alun. So, when you say Yudim, Yuds, letters Yud in the plural, you mean that there were many contractions. What are we talking about? The contractions from the infinite light down into the world of change. So those contractions need to be opened up. Because a contraction is like flexing. You're closing it. The muscle's flexing. It's closing. Nothing's getting through. So that's true. When you look at the world as change, you don't see the permanence of it. You don't see the fixed nature of godliness. You only see the changing nature of godliness. And so you have to open it up somehow. You can't see the source of everything coming into being, the world itself coming into being, from the divine will. We've talked about this in the past, that everything that has consciousness has to have a tzimtzum above it. Because if you don't have a tzimtzum above you, if you don't have a contraction of the light, of the source, if you could see your source, you would stop being conscious, you would stop being separate. In the same way that we can't see our source in our parents. Nobody knows his own birth. Nobody's seen. Nobody was there to witness it. He was there physically, and other people witnessed it. But the person himself can't see it, because if he could see it, he would be swallowed forever in his parents. He would never be able to disconnect. So there has to be some kind of gap between our consciousness and where it came from. Otherwise it won't be real consciousness. It'll just be a computer program. It'll just do what was above. It'll just be Ilah Ve'alun. So for there to be a separate world, there has to be these contractions. And therefore you can't see the source of the world. Nobody can see the source from the divine will. Nobody can see how the world is coming out of the divine will at this moment. But with the Torah, because the Torah contains God's divine will, so I can't see the will as the source of the worlds from the worlds. If I'm looking from the inside, I am looking at my parents, I can't see how I came out of them. But anybody else who was there at the moment of my birth and saw the act, from the side they're looking at it, they can certainly see that. And then they write a birth certificate and say this person was begot from these parents. In the same way, the Torah gives us a vantage point on the world from outside the world. Because the Torah contains God's will, so it's like it's outside of the whole picture. So I can see how it's forming. So you open the Yudim, you open the contractions that created the world, and then you can see the divine will. And for everything that's alive, meaning everything that has life force from God, hamit-pashet ba'olamot. Again, the word mitpashet means that it's changing, that it's extending into the worlds. To see in all of them, liot ben b'chinat ratzon, to reveal in them the will, the divine will. Sheyesh shoreh literally means, that's the word that we've been using to explain he'elem v'gilui, concealment. That like the CBR, the cosmic background radiation, it's permeated here. Shoreh is like to permeate. We use the word inspire today in Hebrew, but really to shoreh, something is shoreh, it's permeating. What does it mean? It permeates everything equally. It's always been here. You can't, there's no place void of it, of this divine will, except that you can't see it.
Can you feel it? So
that's what he's saying. That's what we talked about yesterday. Is it really feeling it? Is that lightning strike really something that you can experience, or is it just a figment of my imagination?
No, it's real.
It is real. The question is whether I can feel it. The question is whether I can experience it in any way. So he says that through the Torah you can. That's what you said yesterday in the story at the end, which I cut off because I didn't know you were going to tell such a nice story about the Achnasa Sefer Torah that you had. You said that the only time that you felt this was when you brought a Sefer Torah. Because when you write the Sefer Torah and you finish it, then it's like the birth of a child. At the bris milah, the last letter is put in, and suddenly the whole thing is enlightened with its soul. And the soul of the Torah is God's will. Okay. But through learning the Torah, you can reveal this in every single person. You can see it in everything that has life. You can see the same will, divine will, permeating them.
But you said the Torah cannot be mislabish, mislabish.
Partially it can, because it's also a mitzvah. So partially the Torah also has islapshus.
Because it said, Semach Tzedek, you know, said if the Midler Rebbe would cut his veins, the blood wouldn't come out. It would be Chassidus.
Okay.
Not literally.
That's islapshus.
Right.
Okay. The Torah is mislabish through the mitzvah. Because it's also a mitzvah. That's what he writes in chapter 5 of the Tanya. That the Torah is both. All the mitzvahs are usually islapshus. They're usually just ispashtus, you would say. That they're just the extension, the change. You create change in the world through mitzvot. But Torah has both aspects to it. It's both makif and islapshus. It's both a surrounding light and a penetrating light. As a penetrating light, it creates change in the person. So that's why you just said about the Tzemach Tzedek, said about the Midler Rebbe, that Chassidus would come out. Again, metaphor, but he's making the point that his body has changed because of the Torah. But at the same time, the Torah is also surrounding you. You can't integrate it, part of it. The essence you can't integrate. The essence is the Ratzon. How would we say this in Kabbalistic language? That the Torah is Chochmah on the one hand, and Chochmah of Hashem that can be integrated into the person. But it's also the Keter, it's also the will of Hashem. The Keter is always the will. The lower part of the Keter is the will. And the Keter is above, is outside the body. It can never be integrated into the person himself. And so these are different languages to say the same thing. And therefore, once you analyze something through Torah, okay, then you reveal the divine will that's creating that thing that you're discussing right now. And you see how the divine will permeates that thing. And these things obviously are the souls. It's not just some inanimate object. Although an inanimate object also has some kind of root. And there is some will that brings it into being. But this is strongest when you learn with a Jew. When you learn Torah with him, you're revealing to him the divine will that created him. There's a lot of stories that Rabbi Yitzchak used to tell us about people that there was a time, I don't know if you know, he was supposed to be the mashpia in Tomchei Tmimim in the Kfar.
Who was?
Rabbi Yitzchak.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. But then Reb Mendel came to Eretz Yisrael.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. And they backtracked on their idea.
Well, the Rebbe sent Reb Mendel, so...
He sent him to Israel. I don't know if he sent him to be the mashpia. I don't know. In any case, he was given the position, and then they decided not to when Reb Mendel came. There might have been other reasons, I don't know, but in the end, Reb Mendel was the mashpia. But they continued to have a sort of relationship with him. The relationship was whenever they got a tough Baal Tshuva, they used to send him to. So all the tough the guys that really made, I think, a lot of a difference ended up coming to him. So like Shalom Arush, when he became Baal Tshuva, he first went to Chabad because that's all there was. Breslov wasn't, so no. So he spent a year with Rabbi Yitzchak.
No, who is?
Shalom Arush. That's like the biggest name in Tshuva today.
Yeah.
He's a Breslover.
Yeah.
He's in Shikun, whatever, like on Kvish Mispar Achat. You know where all we're near Zvil. You know where Zevil is.
Yeah, yeah.
So he has a few buildings down is his place. Chut Shel Chesed, it's called.
Okay.
He's huge. He's sold more books than anybody else today, I think. He has this book, Begana Emunah, the Garden of Faith, which is sold like millions of copies. Or at least printed millions. I don't know if he sells them, he gives them out. I don't know. Anyway, so he was born in Morocco, actually. I think he was born in Morocco. He came here as a child. He was in 669, the elite unit in the Air Force that does chilutzim, like extractions. And then they had a terrible accident. I don't know if you remember this, like in 1980. I remember it vaguely. They had this terrible accident at sea. It was like 5 guys were killed. coming off of helicopters onto a boat or something. I don't know what it was. It was an exercise. It wasn't even a real mission. And it hit him very, very strong. And after the funerals, he was in depression for a while, and he decided that he needs to go find out about God again. Like, he can't just put this behind. He was already an officer there or something. And he ended up in Kfar Chabad, and he asked questions that they said, okay, they shipped him off to the Rav. And he spent a year with them. They learned for a year. And eventually the Rav told him, you should go to Breslov. You're not going to fit in here. It's not going to work. He's not the, what do you call call when a person fits into a mold.
Yeah, you know the term.
You're gonna lose a lot of what you could do, and he was right, because in Breslov he's the biggest figure today in Breslov, and because of his connection with the Rav, he's made a lot of peace because of his connection. His connection with Chabad is very good. I mean, he does his own thing. He's not in any sense a closet Lubavitch or anything like that, but his connection is very warm. He's a lot of shituf pura. He's very he always comes from a good place. Rachel Bolton was like that. You know Rachel Bolton.
She was in the army.
Right. She also came from the army. Mm-hmm. And she was in Nachal or something like that. She was an officer, and they sent her to him.
Oh, yeah.
So what is it? So there's all these stories. Moti Gad was the same story also. And there's dozens of these guys or women, all the people who were tough cases for them. They sent to him. And it was interesting. He never talked to them. He said they came with all these questions. I never talked to them. He said this openly. I never tried to answer their questions. I just said, let's learn. So they learned to sicha. He said, always I started with a sicha. Whatever I was learning at the time, it didn't matter. And he said the light of the Torah answered the questions for them. Not in a rational way, because we're not talking about rational answers. It's not like a specific answer to your question. It's the feeling that I came from this. And my source is in this text, however this text is, whatever it is. I doubt that they understood half of what he said. I mean, today they don't understand a quarter of what he said. So back then, said that they had the siyata d'shmaya, the help from above, that they want to become a Baal Tshuva. Hashem helps them. but overall, I don't think they understood more than half of what he said. But my discussions with these people, each one of them was that the light that came out of the learning convinced them that this is where they should be. And he said something like Ravadin also said, by becoming a Baal Tshuva, it's not that I answered the questions I had. It's a very interesting statement that he said. It's not that I found answers to the questions that I had. It's that I exchanged my questions for better questions. I realized that the old questions were not that important.
Made peace with his questions.
Good. Because that's what we're saying. You can't know everything because there's a tzimtzum. There's some kind of block which allows consciousness to be separate. So you can't really get rid of that barrier. If you would get rid of it, you would stop being you. So really the idea is that you put the barrier somewhere else, because the barrier right now is stopping you from fully fulfilling your potential. You need to move it. And that's sort of what science is doing all the time. It's moving the barrier further and further out. What is the barrier of our knowledge? There's always going to be a barrier. There's always going to be a limit to what we can know. But you push it. Meaning it's not that beyond the barrier there's an infinite expanse that you can know. No, beyond the barrier is stuff you can't know. You moved it. It's a big thing that you moved it, but now it's still a barrier. It'll just expand with your knowledge. And it's needed. So the Torah is a way to get around the barrier, but you can't know what's on the other side. All you can do is you can show that you came from the other side. You can show that you came from that divine will, from that crown. And the body itself, the soul, the psyche in the body cannot contain the the divine love of the divine soul. It's never contained in the body. It's never imbued inside. Sorry, not imbued. It's never engarbed in the body, in the consciousness. מאחר שהרצון העליון בא אצלו לידי גילוי למטה בלבשי הנפש, דיבור מעשה, על ידי דיבור בתלמוד תורה מעשה המצוות, לכן אמרו זה ששואלים את האדם, קבעת העיתים לתורה. But what it can do is it can be influential on you through the Torah learning. So Torah learning here, he's elevating to, or he's looking at the higher state, not as a mitzvah, because if it was a mitzvah, so you would say, mitzvos. You would say, just learning as a mitzvah is enough. But he's saying, no, kavata itim na Torah. He's not using the mitzvah side of it.
Yeah, it could be fixed.
Okay? He's using the fixed side, kavata, kavua. Meaning, it's beautiful how this works. It's like the vessel has to fit the type of light. So if the light that you want in Torah is not the light of understanding, but the light of the kviut, of the fixed, the light of God, of the will of God, which is kavua, which is unchanging. So you have to learn in unchanging times. You have to mimic that light in some way. You have to create a vessel that's like that light. The vessel has to be in set times, fixed times. You can't change the times. The moment that you change them, you're getting light, but it's a different type of light. This is a beautiful statement. Kavata yitim la Torah is the expression that the sages gave for the fixed light that comes through the Torah, and not the changing light. Because again, why do all the other vessels that we have in life, why do they conceal this higher love, this love from the divine soul? Because they're all vessels that deal with change. And you need a fixed vessel. And another important thing is that there's nothing like it in the other side. Meaning there's no tuma there. And it has no end. And then you can come to dibarta. Dibarta, if you have this fixed light, then from there you can gain in the sense of change, in the sense of the Torah that's spoken. Okay? The Torah that's spoken, that you're supposed to speak in it. And the Torah is supposed to be a Torah of life. Life is of change. The Torah has to affect the change, the changing world around you. But that's the lower aspect of the Torah. The higher aspect of the Torah is unchanging. We have some time?
That's what wanted to come early.
You did.
Shem didn't want.
Shem did.
So Rav Gafni was flying to the river in the early days, and couldn't have flown direct. I don't think there were direct flights then. Flew through Europe, but a long schlepp. So he took a maimon. He learned the maimon.
Who is that?
This is Rav Gafni.
Oh yeah.
He's flying to the river, first time, second time, third time. So he decides that he's going to learn a maimon. The river was telling his hands, going to learn a maimon.
And then he had a question at the end.
So he spent 12, 14 hours learning the maimon. And as he gets to the maimon, he had a whole pile of questions.
Yeah.
So he writes down all the questions and decided when he gets into New York, an opportunity. So he'll discuss the questions with the Rebbe. It was Chayil. So as he arrived, basically the Chayil for Brengen was beginning. So the taxi dropped him wherever he was staying. He dumped his suitcases down and he walked straight into 770 for the Chayil for Brengen with the questions in his pocket.
Mm-hmm.
So in the first Sikha the Rebbe spoke, he answered all of his questions one by one in the same order. That's Torah is like,
Okay.
it's the same Torah everywhere.
I have to share something with you.
Yeah.
1 minute.
Yeah.
You've heard of Yudi Dukes, right?
No.
You just don't know that you have. There's a guy who was sick with corona for like 250 days.
Ah, yeah, you told me. Okay, yeah.
So he was on his way to recovery, and he was better, and he was home.
Yeah.
I don't know how long it takes to recover from that. 250 days in intensive care. His body's really wrecked.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly he had some kind of cirrhosis, I don't know what. It's puncture in his liver.
Really?
And the rest of the hospital, the doctors say he has 72 hours.
Mm.
It's been 2 weeks since then.
Mm.
And his wife stands near him. And she says, one of the days when I'm there, she says, and she's been fighting this unbelievable nonsense today, because she said, I wanted to get back home to see the kids before they go to sleep. I have 5 children. So she squeezed his hand and said, Yudi, I know that there's a light, a beautiful light, shining, warm light that you want to go to. Now, you're seeing it. But I want you to know that I'm fighting for you to stay here. And then she said a statement I've never heard anywhere. She said, she wrote this out, and you should see this post. She said, and our love for you, our care for you, everything that we feel towards you, makes this a better place for you to be.
Wow.
Yeah. Why is it? I've never seen this written or spoken or anything, anywhere. But it like gave me an impression of what it means to bring the Geula. To bring the Geula means that everything that's concealed will be revealed. Why will it be revealed? Because it'll be better to be revealed here than it is to be concealed. Meaning, a neshama will prefer to be in the physical world than just to be in the world of souls. A soul will decide it's better to be. Now, how many souls felt that at the end of life? You don't feel that. Maybe, for most of the generations of the world, life was so hard that I doubt they ever felt. And the only thing they had was mitzvahs. The only thing they had that was giving them meaning was mitzvahs. But we have here something that they don't have there. And that's love. It's incredible.
So where is he now?
I think he's still, he's murdam, he's munsham. He's ventilated and he's under. And they did some operation on his liver, but I don't know what. And the refuah tov, refuah shleima for him.